If you were wondering if the Panasonic Lumix S5 Mark II is the camera to buy, then this video is for you. Lumix cameras used to have terrible autofocus. It was contrast-based and no one liked it. No one understood why Lumix was still using it. But now we switched over to phase detect autofocus and everything is great. You can create content knowing that everything is going to be in focus as it should be, as you want it. You of course have all the usual focus settings of having it shoot wide, a large area, centered, a very small area, or you can just touch anywhere on the screen and set it to wherever you like. 6K open gate. You'll see there's a lot more vertical height now and I'm kind of in a square. This is one of the features that actually truly sold me on this camera at all, because having more vertical resolution, it has a lot of benefits. For one, it allows more flexibility in post. If I need to crop in by like a lot, I can, especially if you're doing something for 1080p, that's a big zoom there. And it means you have more resolution for effects and stabilization in post. One of the main reasons I love the 6K open gate is because it's open gate. You get more vertical resolution, which has so much creative potential. For example, I can do a social media portrait video and there's a lot more height. Rather than it being like if I were to crop in a 9:16 image, I would lose so much height that my face would just be, it would look like this. Versus having this much more real estate is so much easier to be able to create stuff for YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, because I can just do it in one go. You could of course just shoot things wider than normal, but then that means you got to remember to shoot everything wider than normal, or you know, you ruin some shots, because if you wanted to get a close-up, but then you bear in mind for social media, you're gonna have to shoot a little bit wider, it kind of ruins some shots. So that option is not really doable. The other way of doing it, of course, you could shoot twice. Pain in the ass, and I don't enjoy doing that. I don't think anybody enjoys doing that. So having more vertical resolution, it's just great. Next point, high frame rates. This camera can do 4K 60 and it can go up to 180 frames per second in 1080p. That's pretty freaking awesome. I know it's not like the be-all end-all of high frame rate cameras nowadays, but 4K 60 is enough for me. I'm pretty happy with that. And going up to 180 frames per second in 1080p, that's incredible. Now, there are some caveats. 4K 60, you crop in a little bit. I try to see that as a positive because you can get some extra reach from your lenses, which can be very useful, can be annoying for some, so take that as you will. And when you go to 180 frames per second, you are in manual focus only. When you do switch into manual focus, when you're going over 120 frames a second, there are some incredible manual focus assist features that kick in that the S5 has. So, you know, it's nothing to worry about when you do jump into it. You've got 10-bit 422 log footage being shot here, and it looks really, really good. So I'm just happy that I know if, hey, I need to get that high frame rate, but I want to slap it into a 4K sequence, it can still kind of hold up. The bitrate is there, the color depth is there, so it looks really good. And that is, of course, the main thing, isn't it? What has happened to the Miami weather? It's been sunny all week. What's happened? I'm now back in the UK. It is too cold. The next feature I am loving about this camera is the dual SD card slots. I always, like, this isn't a new thing. This has been around with quite a few cameras now, but I never had it. I never really appreciated it. Now, I'm like, okay, I've got 2 SD card slots. I'll use them. Wow, the benefits. Okay, let's run through them. First of all, if you're in a situation where, let's say you're shooting a wedding, it's very, very important that everything you have is safe. If one SD card becomes corrupt, but you've got a backup of everything that you've shot from that first SD card slot because everything just copies to the second one. Chef's kiss, amazing. Or the most typical way that I use it is for overflow. If you're recording and card 1 gets full, boom, it keeps going like nothing has happened. You don't have to worry about your cards getting full because you know you have that overflow available. Especially when you're shooting a lot of 6K and 4K high frame rates with this camera, you tend to fill up the cards pretty fast. So it's nice to have that safety buffer of a second SD card slot. So on to my next point, the L mount. The L mount is a very versatile mount that is being picked up by a lot more manufacturers. There's a lot more options today than there were, like, let's say 5 years ago. So you have a range of options from cinematic primes all the way to excellent anamorphic lenses that all work natively with this camera. My current favorite lenses are the 18mm f1.8 from Panasonic, and it's a great vlogging lens, YouTube lens. It's f1.8, so it's nice and fast, and of course, you know, you get that nice shallow depth of field with everything. I also then have a 50mm f1.8 from the same lineup. Panasonic have a whole lineup of f1.8
1.8 prime lenses, and they are all excellent. They're clean and high performing, and they just look good, and they're also very affordable, and they're all the same size. So if you do gimbal work and you want something that fits a budget, these are great lenses, but they're definitely not budget lenses. They perform very well, and I like them a lot. But then of course, if you want something else, maybe a different manufacturer's lens or a lens that isn't made by Panasonic yet, you can go with the likes of Sigma, or you can get an anamorphic lens from Laowa. I've tried out Laowa's nanomorph lenses and they are sick, and it's great that they work natively with this camera. And then of course there's a ton of other manufacturers, and I think there's more adopting the L mount like every year, from Shure to Laowa and to Mike, this brand, I don't know how you pronounce it, with excellent cinema primes and more.
All right, now a bonus reason for getting this camera that I couldn't help but mention. This thing only costs $1,700, the camera alone. You get a behemoth amount of camera for under 2K. And that's just something that I couldn't pass up, because there's a ton of other features I didn't even go into, but you can get 2 of these for the price of one FX3, and that's pretty insane.
My next point, shutter angle. This was something that was very important to me coming from a cinema camera before this. And before I even get into it, let me just quickly break this down. To have realistic motion blur in your shot, your shutter speed needs to be double your frame rate. This means if you shoot at 25 frames per second, you have to shoot at 1/50th of a shutter speed. If you shoot at 50 frames per second, you shoot at 1/100, and so on. It always has to be double to have realistic motion blur. Using shutter angle, it does it automatically. So if you set your shutter angle to 180 degrees, whenever you change your frame rate, your shutter speed automatically will be double your frame rate every time. So it means you never have to worry about changing your shutter speed whenever you change your frame rate, because it's done for you. It negates that, oops, there's too much or not enough motion blur whenever you change your frame rate, because you don't have to remember to change it. It's super duper handy and makes forgetting to change your shutter speed a thing of the past. So it was definitely something to consider when this camera was announced.
And those are just a few of the reasons why I love this camera so much. Honestly, if I were to go through all of them, I'd be here all day. I highly recommend it. There's affiliate links in the description below, which, yes, help out the channel, so thank you very much, guys. Yeah, love this camera. I can't rave enough. It's not perfect, but it's perfect for me. And if you guys want to see a video about those awesome Laowa anamorphic lenses I was talking about earlier in the video, check this video out here and you won't be disappointed, because those are some sick lenses.